It started with construction. So I was born and brought up in the UK. I studied civil engineering. My father was in construction as well. And so I guess my passion for construction and the built environment comes from him. We used to do construction projects at home, like refurbishments and extensions and things like that. So I learned a lot about construction and how things go together. At school, I was quite good at maths and I was really good at physics, and civil engineering and construction kind of brought those two things together. And so I guess my passion started really, really early. And then as I entered into the construction industry, it was just starting to go through this wave of transformation. There was these reports coming out about how the construction industry's production levels are being really, really low compared to other industries. We tend not to learn or change or adapt. We're kind of doing the same things that we've done since the Romans started building things. There's all of these kind of anecdotal stories and kind of studies done. And so as I entered the industry, there was always this kind of self-reflection happening, where the industry was looking at themselves and saying, okay, how can we be better? How can we be more productive? How can we do things safer? How can we do things and improve the quality? And the digital tools were seen as one of the reasons why they worked, right? And so there was all of these studies by these management consultants to show that construction compared to other industries was really low when it comes to digitalization, IT spend, R&D. And so as an industry, people started looking at, okay, how can we bring some of these tools in? And I was just entering the industry. So it's almost serendipity that I came into the industry as digital transformation was happening to the industry. And then as we kind of started to develop tools and systems and processes to introduce digital tools and, went through that true transformation, both in terms of technological, but also systems, processes, and people, we started to see that digital tools can make and have a big impact on what we do in construction. Simple things like, using 3D models, using digital tools instead of paper-based tools. And so all of these kind of started to build. And then about 6 or 7, I think maybe 7 years ago, I was working, and by that time I emigrated to the Middle East, based in Dubai. We were looking at health and safety and how health and safety was still done very traditionally, even though other parts of construction had kind of developed and started using digital tools. Health and safety within the construction industry still seemed to be very analog, paper-based. And even where it had shifted to be digital, it was still kind of copying paper-based processes. They had the processes themselves hadn't evolved. So, and the other part of what I saw was that it was a very people-driven function, right? It was all about the people. It was all about engaging and communicating with people. And the traditional ways of managing safety were very, how do you put it, very governance driven, very compliance driven, and not really looking at what the people and how they do it. It's all about how do we stop them from doing something, right? It was like, how do you stop them from hurting themselves? How do you stop them from doing certain things? And that kind of misalignment of trying to, stop accidents from happening, but also stopping people from doing productive work. It always meant that health and safety was always that friction with the way that construction wanted to do things. And so I saw a way of using chatbots at the time, so very rudimentary AI. So if you can imagine 6 years ago when ChatGPT and some of these tools were not available, I saw a way of using this tool to help break down some of these communication barriers, to be able to understand, help communicate and help the users understand what's going on. And so that's kind of where my journey came. So it started in construction, then evolved into digitalizing construction, and then using that as a basis, then moved into AI.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this story. It sounds really meaningful and so exciting as an evolution, as a development of your interests and everything what you are creating as a value for the world. Prakash, you are operating in the UAE region driven by iconic architecture, speed, and innovation. How do you ensure that this human well-being is embedded in the construction business from the first blueprint to the final brick through all the involved aspects? Can you tell a little bit more about that and mention the details around it?
Yeah, look, I think this is one of the biggest challenges, and not just in this part of the world, any part of the world, right, is making sure that we're enhancing the lives of the people that work in the industry. There are obviously known risks that occur, but they should be no more risky for people to come to work in the construction industry than go to work in an office or, in another environment. We should be able to put in controls. And it's interesting that you mentioned from the blueprint, right? Because safety is seen as something that happens on a construction site, but that's not true, right? Safety happens way, way, way before that. It happens when we're designing, when we're procuring, when we're starting up the conception of a project. And so I think trying to get people to adhere to that and understand that, that's one of the biggest challenges. And there are certain AI tools that are now coming to be able to help with identifying some of the risks and hazards that can be designed out right at the beginning. So people don't often think about the fact that when you're designing a building and you're designing, for example, how to maintain it, how to clean the glass, right, on a big, you see these tall buildings in Dubai, and someone has to think about how is somebody going to go clean the glass on the 102nd floor, right? And if you can put in a system where maybe the glass doesn't need cleaning, it cleans itself. You can create an automated system that a human doesn't need to go up there and clean it. So there's a bunch of things that you can do right from the very beginning before you've even laid a brick or even done anything on the construction site, which can help with safety, right? And similarly, if you think about some of the things that we're designing and engineering, if we can design them in a way that they can be built safely and effectively, that also has an impact on how long it takes to build as well. So sometimes there's this notion that safety adds cost and adds time, but actually, if it's done really well, overall, over the whole kind of life cycle of a project, you'll save time, right? And so, I guess it's kind of first of all having an appreciation of the fact that safety doesn't happen just at the back end once we start building. It happens at the front end when we're designing and at the very beginning of the construction project.
That's so true. And I think it is really important, as you mentioned, to highlight what belongs where, because it starts with the depth of understanding that it's not just about building. So it is one team who is in charge for building and constructing, and somebody else who is going to be in charge for the safety, because we're still humans and we have to take it as something crucial, as a cornerstone of our design thinking, and incorporate it from the early stage. And it is amazing that we're having this conversation now so that we can highlight it and remind about what really matters.
Absolutely.
I love that you are working with it in such an active way. So, what does building with intent truly mean to you in an AI enhanced world where speed, automation, and scale often overshadow deeper human needs and probably even safety aspects?
So I think it means resisting the temptation to automate just for the sake of speed, right? I think building intent is about building for the long-term impact. So we're very focused on the frontline workers, right? I think technology generally, and there's a big risk for AI to kind of bypass some of the demographics, right? The guys and the girls who are going to work every single day at the coalface, at the very bleeding edge of construction. And some of these tools would, and they have done in the past, completely pass them by. So we're making sure that we build tools that are not just going to be benefiting the small demographic of people that sit in the office, the white collar workers, but we try to make sure it's inclusive and available to the biggest demographic that works in the construction industry, which is the labor force, the kind of frontline workers, as we call them. And I think the whole point of what we're trying to do is that the technology, particularly things like AI, are there to amplify human expertise, right? They're there to augment them and not to replace them or overwrite them. I think the intent is making sure we make what we call purposeful progress, and not just scaling and growing for the sake of growing.
I so agree. And there are more risks, I assume, connected to those processes. So let's talk about that and dive deeper. Which risks are we not talking about enough when it comes to construction, especially in hyper urban, high stakes environments like UAE and specifically Dubai, and how AI can mitigate these risks?
So I guess the biggest one that people don't talk about in construction is the mental health risks, right? It's a very high pressure, quick turnaround industry. And particularly in this part of the world, some of the pressures that get put on to construction projects are not necessarily due or at the fault of the construction teams, right? Some of them are because of decisions made completely remotely, design changes, external forces, supply chain issues and things like that. But all of these compound to create a really high pressure environment within construction. And that creates, a real environment for mental health issues. So I think the construction industry is one of the highest suicide rates in the world when it comes to, people killing themselves just because of the fact that they can't talk to anybody or they don't feel like they're going to be heard. And so I think that's one of the big risks that we don't talk about. And then attached to the digital transformation that's happening, and I think we're talking about this just more generally, even outside of construction, is the cognitive overload, constantly being connected to technology, having that, the constant feed of information can lead to a massive overload, right? And we're constantly having to, react to things. So the cognitive load is a huge issue where we're using more and more digital tools within the construction space, and we're asking people to, spend time entering information, analyzing data. And this is similar to what's happening even outside of construction in our personal lives, right? We're constantly bombarded with information. We can access information at our fingertips, and that the digital overload can have huge negative impacts on the kind of psychology of workers as well. And I think particularly in, high stakes environments like the UAE, these small software additions that we kind of introduce can have massive impacts, right? Because there's so many people that work on construction sites in the Middle East. And so the amount of data that you can collect, even if it's small pieces of data from numerous people, can have a huge impact on the, the people having to analyze this, the people having to decide what the impact could be from some of these stuff, and to coordinate some of this information to ensure that you're capturing and understanding what's going on. And so I think that adds another layer of pressure where you can potentially be overwhelmed with the number of data points and the amount of data coming in. So I think we've got to be really, really careful about we spoke about it earlier on, about the speed at which we kind of deploy technology and digital tools, and making sure we're bringing everybody along on the journey with us. I think the risks of adding to some of the pressures because of the introduction of new tools and the pressure of, constantly being engaged with digital tools can add to some of the risks. And I think very few people are talking about it.
I totally agree. And I'm so happy that we are mentioning it today and talking about it, because it resonates so much with what I'm preaching and sharing with the leaders all over the world. Because this way of technological development requires our own upgrade as human beings. We can't handle the expansion of artificial intelligence and other technologies. They are amazing, but we can't handle those technologies. And this evolution, or maybe even revolution in this case, without upgrading our mindset, our skills, our way of handling reality, and sometimes also slowing down. All the conversations are mostly around performance, about efficiency, about exponential growth. But
Yeah.
how are we going to survive this chase of results when we can't focus on the fact that we still are humans? We are still fragile, and we need to take care of each other in a different way. So thank you so much for mentioning this and giving depth to the understanding of why this is so important today, and even more increasingly important day by day.
Just to kind of build on some of that as well. So I think the use of AI tools can help, and I'm seeing quite a lot of this happening, right? Where AI tools are being used to help understand mental health issues, to be able to kind of almost be a first responder, using these chat interfaces and chatbots to almost create a conversational interface for people to feel less lonely, feel like they can get some help and do a bit of triaging. But then we're seeing AI tools automating certain tasks, which allows people to free up part of their day, right? To make sure that they're not sitting at 10, 11 o'clock at night writing a report, because now they're able to use tools to help them to do that more efficiently and effectively, and arguably help with the quality of the output. The other risk, I guess we didn't touch on, is the risk of the bias that exists in some of these AI tools as well. So by solving one risk or mitigating one risk, we could be introducing others. And so I think we need to really be cognizant of the way that we're applying AI, making sure that we understand what it does, understand where it's getting its outputs from, and not just treat it like a black box, right? But blindly trust the answers coming out of it. I think that's a very dangerous way of us proceeding. I've seen it happening. I can see the kind of path that we're going down would potentially mean that people just, ask it for an answer. Yeah, it gives you an answer, and then you just blindly follow what it says without thinking about, the repercussions of it. And I think we at Navatech are certainly making sure we're understanding AI, right? We're trying to make our models understandable. And so that when we need to make tweaks, or, if it gives an answer that we didn't expect, we can go trace back and understand why that happened.
Exactly. This is the critical moment of anti-fragility in this context. But now I'm so interested in hearing more. Could you please share the most brutal case you've seen in your experience where this black box impacted business or life in a negative way?
So I think in the early days, we saw some of these early chatbots start to turn, racist and misogynistic. The early days were there, I think when, I can't remember if it was Meta who released a chatbot, and it quickly started becoming anti-Semitic and misogynistic. And because it was reflective of the content, and we talked about the bias in just a few minutes ago, it basically became almost as a mirror of the way that humans interact on the internet. That's not how they interact in real life, right? And so this is other massive risk that we've got. These LLMs have been trained on content that's on the internet, and there's this baseline assumption that's humans are. They're not, right? That's how humans are when they're interacting with the internet. And the internet's only been around for about 25 years. And so there's this real kind of risk of that we're embedding certain biases, certain negative connotations and negative aspects of humanity that are evident on the internet. And then now using those to kind of build tools to help us do business, right? And so I guess there was that one, and there was a Google one where it was analyzing images, and it became, again, it was really, really poor identifying non-white males, right? So the way that it would identify even white females was really poor. Those were real catastrophic failures of AI very early on. But in a way, it was good, because what that meant was that these organizations learned that they needed to put safeguards in place. They learned that the models had to be of a certain standard before they became consumable by the wider public. So I think there's that element of it, but we've got to continue to learn those lessons. I think we can't just rest on our laurels. As we get AI to do more and more, and we get AI to augment more and more of what's happening and automate things that we're doing within our daily lives and our business lives, we have to constantly be checking and remembering that the AI can still do things wrong. It can still give you incorrect answers. So you still have to go and check the sources of things, understand where these are coming from, and basically build up your trust. The way I see it is we treat it in the same way that you treat a new colleague, right? Is that you wouldn't automatically trust that colleague with everything, right? You'd build trust in that colleague over time. And I think that's the way that we've got to treat most AI tools.
I agree. And I also thought about two things. The first one, I remember those scandals where AI was presenting absolutely incredible things which had nothing to do with history, with reality, or with humanity, anything of that. And that was on the surface. That was easy to notice. And it happened sort of overnight with another update. So there was a lot of people who could point out that something doesn't make sense at all. But there are also other systems which are rooted much deeper, and we might not notice it in the same way. And the consequences might be much more dangerous, actually, because that was quite innocent, relatively innocent. It didn't impact lives in a way it might impact as we are using AI solutions in medical system, in different systems, which are truly changing the course of one's life. And I think the other aspect of this is also that AI systems are hallucinating more often today because the complexity is increasing, and it means that it requires a different approach. And I love your solution to it, that you need to treat it as a new colleague and develop trust over time. And actually, yesterday I had a conversation with ChatGPT exactly asking for those most brutal, most negative cases of requests from other people, what it's asked to help with, to do, to support. And I've got those examples. And I can tell that it's not something we want to see more in the world. And hopefully, those AI solutions are going to preserve their ethical aspects and boundaries to distinguish what is good and what is bad, because otherwise it might create a lot of trouble for all of us and for our future.
And look, you made a really good point. There are certain other where AI is being used that can have a real human impact, right? So, AI being used to evaluate job applications, for example, that can have a massive impact, right? And simply because, there's certain jobs that have traditionally gone to certain gender types, that's the data that's the AI works upon, basically thinks that that's what's normal, right? So, it's normal for it thinks that it's normal for a CEO to be a man, as an example, right? Like, obviously, we know that that's not the case, but because of the historical data that over skews it to learn what a CEO looks like, as an example, when it then reviews a candidate and then the candidate is a woman, potentially might start ranking that candidate down just because of the gender of the applicant. And so, again, being cognizant of the fact that the data that we're using to train AI has biases in it, has imbalances in it, and we need to make sure that those then don't propagate and then get exacerbated, right? Because the other fear is that now we're getting to a place where the AI models are being trained on AI generated content, right? You see the internet now, and you're seeing videos now, and so much content being generated by AI, posted back onto the internet, and then at some point you're going to have a flip where you're going to have more AI generated content than human generated content. And so if we're embedding biases in the content and then that content is then being used to train the next stage of AI, we're just going to get into this real death spiral, right? Which is quite scary. And so again, we have to be really, really, really careful that we're constantly keeping the human in the loop, right? In the way that we train the models, in the way that we evaluate what's coming out from the model, making sure that our AI models are understandable at the human level so that we don't run into the risks of some of these things happening.
It's great that you mentioned it, because I just thought about the same when you mentioned it. The synthetic data, which is put in the digital space today, I saw already some updates around the fact that the data after 2022 is considered to be unsafe. And as we don't mark AI generated content as AI generated content, it's close to impossible to distinguish those two, human generated and AI generated, synthetic. And then AI is basically training more and more on its own content, which gets further and further away from our human way of creating information. It's really interesting aspect we have to address as well. So I love our conversation. We are touching on so many important things today. And by the way, to all of our listeners and viewers, if this conversation sparks something for you, hit like, follow, or subscribe and share it with one person you know would be inspired by this episode. Sharing is caring. Have you ever witnessed AI make their own decision in a project? Now we're talking about the general deviations, but let's talk about business again. What did it reveal about the boundaries of trust between human expertise and machine logic? And how can we mitigate those risks in business?
So I guess in the early stages of developing our product, we sometimes saw AI categorizing certain risks and hazards in a completely different way to a human would. And initially, actually, we thought that was wrong. But when we took it and showed it to numerous health and safety experts, they thought twice about it and actually thought, oh, actually maybe this is a different way of looking at it, right? Or this is a different perspective. And so I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? So um, there's elements where clearly AI can get it wrong and it can hallucinate. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But there's also the potential for it to help you see a different perspective, for it to kind of open things up where you, because of the constraints that we've got based off of our own internal biases, the limitation of experience that we have, the limitation of the knowledge that we can call upon, and the time that we've kind of spent on this earth. I guess AI has this advantage of being able to give you this very broad and diverse window into the way of looking at things. And so there are certain aspects where I think we should also not play down, giving AI the opportunity to be a bit, I don't want to use the word creative because that's not what it's doing, but give it a bit of latitude. And then see where it takes it, right? So I've been in workshops and things like that where it says that people say no idea is a stupid idea, no question is a stupid question. And so I think there are some cases where we can give AI that latitude, right? Where no response is a stupid response. And again, talking about all the things we'll be talking about, is up to us as humans then to understand and accept or reject what the AI is saying. I think some of these things continue to tell us that we have to keep these humans in the loop, right? We have to be able to tell the AI when we think that it's gone wrong, or that it could improve the way that it's done it, or like I said, change the way that we perceive some of the things because the AI might have seen something that we haven't, or it presents it in a way that we've never thought about before. And it all comes down to being able to build trust, right? Being able to build trust between yourself and the responses, that outcomes that are coming out from these AI.
I agree. But I see two different applications right now. The one, it is about that type of communication, decision making, creative processes. And I think we can call it creativity because actually it is helping us as well becoming more creative. And I remember one of my previous conversations on this podcast with a world renowned artist who has been painting for Dalai Lama and Tiger Woods. And he was talking about how he is applying AI to develop his creativity and develop his talent. So Vilas Nayak is his name. And it was a very inspiring conversation. And I learned a lot about how we can develop our creativity as well based on our interaction with AI. So I'm totally open to that. And I think the aspect which requires more responsibility from us, it is the automation aspect, the agentic application, because there we have truly much less insight and control compared to decision making where we are still processing the outcomes and it's up to us to choose what resonates with us and what doesn't make sense and then proceed with that.
Yeah.
So
Your point about creativity, though, I think the point you're making is that it's augmenting human creativity, right? It's not being creative in its own self. It's presenting ideas. It's again, giving you different perspectives so that you can then do the creative bit. So I'm on the fence about whether we can call some of these AI models as being creative. They kind of, the way that they do it is that they're obviously regurgitating information and putting bits of information together from other bits. And then there's a philosophical question about whether that's what humans do as well, and then that's what we call creativity. But I guess, yeah, I'm still not comfortable calling the AI creative, but I do subscribe to what you described in the second part of what you were saying, is that it can help us be more creative or help adapt our creativity? Absolutely. I think we see that in creative writing. Lots of people use it to help you write better emails or write birthday messages and things like that. And so using it that way, where you're still in control of that creative process and using it as a tool to inform your creative process, I think that's absolutely fine. And that's the way we should be doing it.
You are so right about it. And still, I can't let go the thought that, there are so many humans who are deeply operating with their left half of the brain, the logical one, and creativity is living on the right side. So some humans are still probably not much more creative than those models.
Yeah.
And it always helps to get in the broader picture. I see it as a puzzle with more pieces of information. And the more pieces you get on your table into your world, the easier it becomes to be more creative and come up with something new. So it just helps us broadening our vision and getting a broader perspective, which is enabling us to take the next step, which is amazing. And I'm using it oftentimes myself that way because I always search for the new ways of getting more input and more data points into my own database. Because actually, in a way, we are operating in a similar way to the AI solutions. We need that information into our database in order to create something, create that output. And the more data we have to work with, the better the results can be. So it is really interesting.
Yeah.
And now, when we are talking about creativity and business, let's take a step back into the construction world. So, Prakash, in your experience, where is the biggest current disconnect between AI innovation in construction and actual adoption on the ground?
I think it's accessibility, right? I guess the frontline workers, they come from a certain demographic. They have a certain, literacy level when it comes to language, but also a certain literacy level when it comes to technology. And I know I'm generalizing here quite a lot, but what we see, particularly in this part of the world, is they come from the Indian subcontinent, and some of the devices that they've got, even internet connectivity, right? Being able to access what we now consider to be almost a basic human right, to be able to access the internet, is not readily available. A lot of the workers here, some of them don't have smartphones, and so that limits them. Those who do have smartphones don't have the kind of mobile access and credit, so they have to wait until they get into a Wi-Fi zone and things like that. So all of these things that I guess a lot of us take for granted, just simply we can take out our smartphones. We've probably got an internet package with our mobile service providers, and we can do what we want, access ChatGPT or any of these apps, and even pay for the pro version of these, right? Give you better tools and things like that. It's not available to everybody. So accessibility, I think, is a huge kind of barrier to getting people to adopt these technologies, getting people to understand them. You and I both know as well that the more you kind of work with these tools, the better they get, right? The better they are for us, right? And so if you don't have access to them, you're gonna start getting left behind very, very quickly. And so that for me is the biggest kind of barrier to making sure that we're all as inclusive as possible is accessibility, getting people access to the technology. Then the other part of what we're seeing is that a lot of the technology isn't even designed for the field workers, right? Particularly, I'm just talking about construction. I assume it's probably similar in other industries, is that a lot of the digital tools, whether they're AI or not, are designed for, I'm going to class them as white collar workers, right? The people like me and you who work in the office, in an air conditioned workstation with like 2 screens, and the tools are designed for people like us who, create better dashboards, to analyze data more efficiently and do all of these. And now AI is kind of being utilized to automate and make those things. Very, very few tools are looking at, the people on the construction site themselves. How do we make tools like this available to them, or even people thinking about whether the tools like this are going to be useful for this cohort of people in an organization? And so I think that's another element that's really kind of creating a barrier to getting adoption is the tools are not designed for them in the first place. They're not looking at, does this cohort speak the language that we've designed the tool in, right? Is their user experience, the way that they consume applications and that the same as everybody else? Most likely not. And so I guess all of these things adding together means that we've got a potential to increase the digital divide, right? Have nots. And so we have to be really, really careful that the AI race and the kind of thing that we're doing at the moment doesn't disadvantage this group of people even more than they already are.
I couldn't agree more about this because it is truly crucial to take care of humans and see them behind technologies as well and create a better world through different projects, different types of collaborations, different types of areas where we can truly bring the best through AI, through our way of seeing the problematics first and then solving those problems with technologies so that we see a sustainable uplift for the future.
Yeah.
That's truly important.
100%, right? And the word I was struggling to find before was inclusivity, right? We need to make sure that AI adoption is inclusive. We cannot leave people behind, right? In this, I think it's true important transformation that anybody gets left behind.
Yes, you are so right about it. And I see that the words, when we're talking about AI adoption, are used sometimes in their own way, I would say, because people is using them still to manipulate, to run their own agenda. Right words, wrong steps forward. So we also have to keep in mind that it is important to see the depth in it and become a little bit, at least a little bit wiser when we are adopting those technologies to truly create that inclusivity, which is supporting those who really need that support.
Absolutely.
Prakash, can you share a few real stories from your professional experience around bridging the gaps we just mentioned?
So look, we've got lots of examples where we've adapted our product because of the feedback that we've got or something we've seen within the construction industry. I'll give you a perfect example. We built our application to be multilingual, right? So the AI allows you to communicate in multiple different languages. I think we're up to about 103 languages, right? So we're constantly adding new languages as we get comfortable that the accuracy of them is good. And what we initially designed it to do was for people to speak in one language and then get a response back in that same language, right? So, Hindi, Bengali, Malayalam, all of these languages are popular in this part of the world. And what we found one of our customers doing was they spoke in one language. So they spoke in Arabic. They set the output language to be Bengali and then got the output. And we wondered, like, why we never thought of this as a use case. When we asked them why, what they were doing was when they were on a construction site, they saw somebody walking on the wrong side of a barrier to an excavation. And because they don't speak the same language, all they could do was, use arm movements, gesticulate, come back over, bring them over. So job one done, right? You stop them from doing the unsafe act, right? Immediately stop them. But because they don't speak the same language, you haven't explained, he didn't explain to him how what he was doing was unsafe, and most likely he'll do it again, right? 5 minutes later, he'll go and do it again because he didn't know. But what they used our technology to do was he then spoke in Arabic and explained what the dangers are of working near deep excavations, and then played the voice note to him in Bengali, right? The response that came back in his language. And so not only was he in that moment stopping him from doing something unsafe, but he was also hopefully now giving him the understanding of why what he was doing unsafe in a language that he understood, right? And so giving him that education to understand the risk next time round, with the hope that means that he's unlikely to do it again. I think that's a great example of how we can use this technology, make it accessible to basically help get better safety outcomes.
I absolutely love your example. And it is so good to remember that it is important to speak the same language and to explain, not just get the results, get the solution, but also explain the why behind so that you don't need to do it again. And that's exactly how that sustainable transformation is happening.
Yeah.
When I'm thinking about it in my world, it needs to be based on the deep understanding and acceptance. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's going to just repeat, and you will need to do the same thing over and over again. And what you are describing, it is really something impactful. And imagine how many lives it can save as well, and probably already saved. So it is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this example.
Thank you.
What role do you believe AI will play in shaping the soul of the construction industry over the next 3 to 5 years?
Oh, that's a deep question. I think I think look, the soul of construction, despite what people think, is innovative. You can't get the types of buildings that we see in Dubai. If you looked at a a really complex road intersection from the sky, and see that complexity, that is innovation, right? That's over years and being built. But I think we get a negative press as an industry for being, archaic, backward, and not being very innovative. But at its core, we're full of architects and engineers and people solving problems every single day. Innovation is about solving problems, and people in construction solve hundreds of problems every single day, right? Conditions change, materials don't get delivered, the design changes, the weather changes, all of these things compound to mean that the construction workers every single day are having to make adjustments and make decisions to make sure they still reach the right outcome. So I think AI is going to potentially help bring that soul out, right? It's help us change the perception, because it will help amplify that innovative soul that we've got within the construction industry. I think the other part of it is it's going to help us to hopefully be more productive, so do more with the resources that we've got. Help us to be much more sustainable in terms of enable us to identify, waste, more effective and efficient ways of doing things. And so you talk about how it will shape or change. I think we're going to start because AI will help us become more sustainable, right? Both environmentally, but also from a social and a governance perspective, right? That kind of truly becoming sustainable, and AI will, I hope, will help accelerate that process. I think we're on the journey already, but I think AI is going to help us accelerate getting there.
We're definitely on the journey, but I'm also absolutely sure that artificial intelligence is going to help us both accelerate in those processes, but also enabling the aspects in ourselves which are truly needed for that transformation. And for the moment, most of the leaders don't even see that coming, but I see that coming already. And I see the response, the inner response to certain things I'm talking about, that we are truly longing to becoming that type of human being who can co-create together with AI and see those fantastic results in a totally different way. So I'm
Yeah.
so looking forward to this development, and this is an exciting journey.
Definitely exciting times. Yeah. And I think the other part of what AI will continue to help us do is be more collaborative, be more transparent, and hopefully continue to help us be more adaptive, right? I think in a changing world, in the changes in all aspects, right? In what we have to build, as we've got mass urbanization happening, as we've got, smart cities and electrification happening, all of these things, there's external forces that are impacting the construction industry. I hope that AI can help us to translate those, right? To be able to absorb those and to be collaborative, be transparent, and be adaptive to these things.
And still, we have to make sure that we incorporate the ethical aspects early enough, because at certain point there might be no way back. And we have to take care of this before that moment comes. And it's up to us. It's our responsibility, because there is still quite a small group of people in the world who is standing for this. AI development,
Yeah.
truly. And we have to be that type of humans who are wise and deep and think not only about short term profits and benefits, but also about long term results and impact.
You and I spoke about this when we first met, as about um, I'm really pleased that we are having these types of conversations on AI. I feel like, you know, the last kind of wave of transformation that happened to humans, like, was social media after the internet. And with social media, I think everybody went in feet first without really thinking about what the potential impacts and you know, negative consequences of it might be, until it was too late, right? We started talking about it when we saw social media influencing elections, mass collecting data, and then selling it to others. And by that time, it was too late, right? The horse has bolted. Here, this time round, I'm really pleased that there are conversations about, you know, governance, the potential negative impacts of it. On the other side, the flip side, the power of it. And so, kind of finding this balance. I think there is a requirement for, you know, governments and legislation to get involved, some guidelines and some controls to stop it from evolving into some of the potential negative aspects of it. And there are, right? It's, look, at the end of the day, AI is a tool. In the same way, if I use the analogy of construction, hammer is a tool that can be used to build a beautiful piece of furniture, but it could also be used to hurt somebody, right? You could hit somebody with a hammer and do some serious damage. I think AI is similarly a tool, and we've got a responsibility to make sure that we're using it morally and ethically in the right way to get some of those massive advantages that we can, or that we've been talking about today, but I'll also be talking more widely.
This is gold. And I feel exactly the same. I'm so proud and happy that we can have this type of conversations on the right level with the impact we would like to create. And this ripple effect, it's going to touch so many different parts of AI development. And it is going to also help leaders change themselves and the ways they are working with technologies and developing their business and prioritizing things in their roadmaps. So this conversation is truly timely and needed. It is quite rare as well because most part of AI conversations are focused on slightly different dimensions and aspects. And this is needed. And we are opening up the space and letting others also start and running these conversations. And it's unbelievable. I just ran 2 amazing events in Stockholm, and I saw how those events were different from most part of other events, according to the feedback I've got. And it was a great surprise for those leaders who participated. And the fact that they mentioned that this helps them standardizing and normalizing this type of conversations in other forums is also so important. And that's what we are doing.
Yeah, fantastic.
I could run this conversation for so much longer, but I want your one piece of advice for leaders and business owners to mitigate risks and maximize the business outcomes in a sustainable way in this AI powered world. Could you please share more of your wisdom?
So if there's one piece of advice, I think don't adopt AI to impress investors or just for the sake of adopting AI. Adopt it to protect your people, right? So look at how it's going to improve something that your people are doing or make things safer, more efficient, more effective for them. Start with maybe one area of high friction within your organization or a real pain point, and then work with those people to come up with a solution that incorporates AI that truly adds to that, right? Rather than just adding AI for AI's sake. I've seen so many examples of AI just being introduced because it's just all of a sudden appeared as a KPI from senior leadership. And so when setting these goals, I think it should be looking at being very outcome driven rather than to tick a box and press a senior or an investor or somebody like that.
Brilliant advice. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here today, sharing your wisdom, your experience. And I'm sure that this is going to help so many leaders and experts working with AI, developing new technologies to avoid the pitfalls, to prioritize what really matters, and to help them build in business in a more powerful and sustainable way. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today and your vibes as well, of course.
Thank you for giving me the environment to do so, right? And setting this thing up. I think what you're doing is fantastic. Having this conversation about the human elements of AI and the impact that it's going to have, I think is great. We should be having more of these types of conversations. So thank you, and I appreciate you inviting me to do this.
Thank you. We are definitely going to have more of this. So, to all the listeners and viewers, stay tuned. This is not the only one conversation we are going to have. Thank you for joining us on Digital Transformation and AI for Humans. I'm Amy, and it was enriching to share this time with you. Remember, the core of any transformation lies in our human nature, how we think, feel, and connect with others. It is about enhancing our emotional intelligence, embracing a winning mindset, and leading with empathy and insight. Subscribe and stay tuned for more episodes where we uncover the latest trends in digital business and explore the human side of technology and leadership. If this conversation resonated with you and you are a visionary leader, business owner, or investor ready to shape what's next, consider joining the AI Game Changers Club. You will find more information in the description. Until next time, keep nurturing your mind, fostering your connections, and leading with heart.